I'm alive. It's not me in the coffin. With trembling hands, I replied, "Who are you?" The answer took my breath away. "I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our children." That moment split my soul in two. My world crumbled as I looked at Marcus and Darnell, my own sons, standing beside the casket with eerily calm expressions. Something was deeply wrong. Their tears seemed forced. Their embraces were as cold as winter ice. My husband Willie's funeral was the strangest day of my life. There, beside his grave, under the blazing Alabama sun, I received a text from an unknown number that sent chills down my spine. And what happened next changed everything I thought about family. My name is Dorothy Mae Johnson. I am 68 years old. What I'm about to tell you changed my life forever and almost cost me my life. For 42 years, Willie had been my partner, my refuge, my reason for living. And now, someone was telling me he wasn't in that coffin. Or worse, that my own children knew something I didn't. I met Willie Johnson when I was 24, in the small town of Maplewood, Alabama. We grew up on the same dirt streets, sharing modest dreams and big hopes. I cleaned houses to support my ailing mother, while Willie fixed cars in a small garage he inherited from his father. We were poor, but we were happy. We had something money couldn't buy: true love, faith in God, and dignity. I remember the first time he spoke to me. It was a Tuesday morning, as hot as only Alabama can be. I was walking toward the market in my faded green dress and worn shoes. He emerged from the shop with his hands covered in grease, but with that shy smile that made me instantly fall in love. "Good morning, Dorothy Mae," he said quietly, taking off his battered cap. "Need me to look at your bike?" I didn't even have a bike, but I made up an excuse just to talk to him. That conversation turned into meetings under the great oak tree in the town square, then into promises of eternal love, and finally, a simple wedding in a Baptist church full of hope and gospel songs. The first few years were difficult. We lived in a 2-bedroom house with a roof that leaked when it rained. We placed buckets everywhere to catch the water, but we were happy. Willie worked from sunrise to sunset in the workshop. I sewed clothes for the women in town and tended our small vegetable garden in the backyard. When Marcus was born, I thought my heart would burst with joy. He was a beautiful baby with his father's big eyes and my smile. 2 years later, Darnell arrived, just as perfect as his brother. I raised my boys with all the love in the world, sacrificing my own needs for theirs. Willie was a wonderful father. He took the boys fishing on the river on Sundays. He taught them to fix things with their own hands. He told them Bible stories before bed. I fed them, clothed them, comforted them when they cried. We were a close family, or so I believed. Have you ever built something with love for years, never imagining that one day it would be destroyed by the people you loved most? As they grew older, things began to change. Marcus, the oldest, was always ambitious. From a young age, he wondered why we lived so modestly, why we didn't have a new car like other families. Darnell followed his brother's example in everything, as he always did. When Marcus turned 18, Willie offered him a job at the garage, but he rejected it with a disdain that still pains me to remember. "I don't want to get my hands dirty like you, Dad. I'm going to be someone important. I'm going to have real money." Those words hurt Willie deeply, though he never told me. I saw him sitting on the porch at night, gazing at the stars with a look of profound sadness. His son had rejected not only his work, but his entire way of life. The years passed. To my surprise, Marcus managed to make a name for himself in the business world. He landed a job at a real estate agency in the city. Darnell followed soon after. They both began making money, far more than Willie and I had ever seen. At first, I was proud. My children had achieved what we never could: escape poverty and build a better life. But little by little, this joy turned into sadness. The visits became less frequent. The calls became shorter. When they did come, they arrived in expensive cars, dressed in elegant suits, talking about investments and properties. They looked at us with a strange mixture of pity and shame. "Mom," Marcus said to me during one of his sporadic visits, "you guys should move to a better place. This house is falling apart." He was right. But that house held all our memories. It was where we raised our children, where we shared thousands of meals, where we grew old together. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Willie, ever wise, would say to me, "Dorothy Mae, money has changed our boys. We're not enough for them anymore." I resisted believing it. I continued to justify his absences, his brief calls, his broken promises. They're busy building their lives, I told myself. One day they'll be the loving boys we raised again. But in my heart, I knew Willie was right. We had lost our children long before I lost my husband. We simply didn't realize how much we had become strangers to them. Have you ever seen someone you loved completely change because of money? Have you ever felt like you weren't enough for your own children? The most drastic change came when Marcus married Keisha Montgomery, a city woman who never hid her disdain for our simple lifestyle. The first time he brought her home, she arrived in high heels that sank into the dirt on our porch. She wore an elegant red dress that looked more expensive than anything I'd ever owned. "Nice to meet you," he said with a forced smile, barely extending his fingertips to greet me. His eyes roamed our humble home with an expression I couldn't decipher, but it made me feel small, inferior, ashamed of the life we'd built with so much love. During dinner, Keisha barely touched the food I had prepared with such care. She stirred the mashed potatoes on her plate, cut into bite-sized pieces of fried chicken, but barely ate anything. Marcus seemed nervous, constantly apologizing for things he'd never been ashamed of before. "Next time, let's take them to a restaurant," he whispered to Keisha, thinking I couldn't hear. But I listened. Every word pierced my heart like a sharp knife. Darnell, for his part, remained single, but adopted his brother's same distant attitude. His visits were limited to special occasions, and even then, he always seemed in a hurry to leave. He was constantly on his cell phone, closing deals, even during our conversations. "Mom, I have to go," he always said ahead of time. "I have an important meeting tomorrow morning." Family Sundays became a distant memory. Christmases became cold and formal. My children brought expensive gifts we didn't need. They stayed for 2 or 3 hours and left with obvious relief. Willie and I grew old alone, comforting each other. He continued working in the workshop, although his hands no longer had the same strength. I continued sewing, but my eyes were no longer the same. We were content with our small income, proud that we didn't ask for anything from our successful children. "You know what the saddest part is, Dorothy Mae?" Willie said to me one night as we drank iced tea on the porch. "It's not that they have money, it's that money has made them believe we're no longer important." He was right, as always. My children hadn't just changed financially, their hearts had changed. We were no longer their beloved parents. We were an uncomfortable reminder of a past they wanted to forget. Have you ever felt embarrassed by your own children? Have you ever been treated as a burden instead of a blessing? Things got worse when Marcus bought a $200,000 house in an exclusive Birmingham neighborhood. Darnell followed suit soon after, investing in a luxury apartment costing $150,000. Suddenly, our children were owners of fortunes we could never have imagined. "You guys should sell this house and move to a retirement community," Keisha suggested during one of their rare visits. "There are some really nice places for people your age. You'd feel more comfortable." The word community hit me like a slap. A retirement community. After 40 years building our home, after raising these children with so much love, they wanted to send us to a nursing home. "We don't need a nursing home," Willie replied, with the dignity that always characterized him. "We're fine here in our own home." But I saw the expressions on Marcus and Darnell's faces. They supported Keisha's idea. To them, we were a burden, a problem to be solved in whatever way was most convenient. It was then that the more direct suggestions began. Marcus arrived one day with papers in hand, documents he had prepared without consulting us. "Dad, Mom," he said with that fake smile he'd perfected, "I've been thinking about your future. This house is worth $15,000 at most. If you sell it, I can add some money so you can move to a better place." For us, there was no better place than the house where we were happy for decades. But Marcus didn't understand this. For him, it all came down to numbers. Monetary value. "Besides," he continued, "I think Father should retire from the shop. He's already 70. It's time for him to rest." Willie looked at him with infinite sadness. "Son, work is not a burden to me. It's what keeps me alive. It's what gives meaning to my days." "But you could get hurt," Darnell insisted, supporting his brother as he always did. "At your age, an accident would be very dangerous." The words seemed thoughtful, But I sensed something else behind them. An impatience, an urgency I couldn't fully comprehend. The following months were tense. My children increased the pressure on us to sell the house. They brought in real estate agents without telling us. They appraised the house without our permission. They even started talking about what would be best for everyone. "Look, Mom," Marcus told us during a particularly awkward dinner. "Keisha and I have decided to have kids soon. We're going to need help with the expenses. If you sell the house and move to a smaller place, this money could be an early inheritance." An early inheritance. He was asking for our inheritance while we were still alive. The audacity of his request left us speechless. Willie remained calm, but I saw his jaw tense. "Son, when your mother and I die, everything we have will be yours. But while we are alive, our decisions will be our own." "Don't be stubborn, Dad," Darnell interrupted with a harshness I'd never seen in him before. "You're old now. You can't keep living in the past." That night, after they left, Willie and I stayed up talking until dawn. For the first time in our marriage, we discussed the possibility that our children were not the people we thought we had raised. "Something's wrong, Dorothy Mae," my husband told me, with a look of concern I'd never seen in his eyes. "It's not just ambition or impatience. There's something darker behind all this pressure." I had no idea how profoundly true his words were. I couldn't imagine that my own children were planning something that would change our lives forever. I didn't know that the tragedy that was coming wouldn't be an accident of fate, but a carefully orchestrated conspiracy by the two people we trusted most in the world. Have you ever felt like someone close to you wanted you to disappear to make their lives easier? Have you ever been pressured to give up everything you've built? The last normal conversation I had with Marcus was 3 weeks before Willie died. He came alone, without Keisha, and looked more serious than usual. "Mom," he said, sitting down at the kitchen table where he had eaten breakfast so many times as a boy, "I want you to know that no matter what happens, Darnell and I will always take care of you." His words soothed me at the time. But now, remembering them beside Willie's grave, they sent a chill down my spine. Why did he say, "no matter what happens"? What did he know that I didn't? The accident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning. Willie had left early for the shop, as he had done every day for over 40 years. I was in the kitchen preparing his favorite lunch, pork ribs with green beans and cornbread, when the phone rang with an urgency that sent chills down my spine. "Mrs. Johnson?" asked a voice I didn't recognize. "I'm calling from Birmingham Memorial Hospital. Your husband has been in a serious accident. You need to come immediately." The words blurred in my mind, like ink in water. The world stopped. My legs turned to jelly. I had to hold on to the refrigerator door to keep from falling. "What happened? Is he okay? Is he alive?" "He's in the ICU, ma'am. Please come as soon as possible." The trip to the hospital was a nebulous nightmare. My neighbor Betty had to drive me because I was shaking so badly I couldn't even hold my car keys. The whole way, my mind refused to process what was happening. Willie was careful, meticulous in his work. How could this happen? When we arrived at the hospital, Marcus and Darnell were already there. This surprised me, because no one had warned them yet. At least I hadn't. But in my desperation, I didn't pay attention to this detail. "Mom," Marcus said, hugging me with a strength that seemed genuine. "Dad's in terrible shape. The doctors say one of the machines in the shop exploded. He has severe burns and a head injury." Darnell's eyes were red. But there was something strange about his expression. He looked more nervous than sad, like someone waiting for important news rather than someone grieving for their father. "Can we see him?" I asked desperately. "Only the closest family," the nurse explained, "one at a time and for a maximum of 5 minutes." When I walked into that ICU room, my heart sank. Willie was hooked up to a dozen machines. Bandages covered most of his face and arms. I barely recognized him. His breathing was labored, artificial, supported by constantly beeping machines. I walked over to his bed and took his hand, the only part of his body that seemed intact. "Willie, my love, I'm here. Everything's going to be okay. You'll recover, as always." For a moment, I felt a slight squeeze on my hand. His eyes moved behind closed lids. He was fighting. My warrior was fighting to come back to me. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I practically lived in the hospital, sleeping on the uncomfortable chairs in the waiting room. Marcus and Darnell took turns accompanying me, but they always seemed more interested in talking to the doctors than comforting their father. I heard fragmented conversations that I couldn't fully understand at the time. Darnell was asking about health insurance and the cost of treatment. Marcus was on the phone talking about life insurance policies and beneficiaries. "Mom," Marcus told me on the second day, "we reviewed Dad's insurance. He has a $50,000 life insurance policy. There's also a workers' compensation policy that could cover up to $75,000 more." Why was he talking to me about money when Willie was still fighting for his life? Why was he worried about insurance instead of his father's recovery? "Don't worry about money," I replied harshly. "I just want your father to get better." "Sure, Mom," he said. But I saw something in his eyes I didn't like. A coldness. A calculator working while his father was dying. Have you ever seen someone calculating profits while someone else was fighting for their life? Have you ever realized you were being deceived, but your heart refused to believe it? On the third day, the doctors gave us the most devastating news of my life. Dr. Patterson, an older man with a compassionate expression, gathered us in a small office. "Mrs. Johnson," he began softly, "your husband's condition is critical. The burns have become infected, and the head injury is more severe than we initially thought. We have to be realistic about his chances." "What does that mean?" I asked, though my heart already knew the answer. "It means we need to prepare for the worst. Your husband is in a medically induced coma. We could keep him alive indefinitely, but his quality of life, well, it's highly unlikely he'll regain consciousness." My world came crashing down around me. 42 years of marriage, a lifetime spent together, and now they were telling me it was all disappearing like smoke. "We want to try everything," she said through sobs, "no matter the cost, no matter how long it takes." But Marcus exchanged a look with Darnell that deeply disturbed me. "Mom," Marcus said in a voice that tried to sound understanding, "we have to be practical. Dad wouldn't want to live like this. He always said he never wanted to be a burden to anyone." A burden. I exploded in a fury I didn't know I had. "He's your father. He's not a burden. He's the man who raised you, who worked his whole life to give you the best he could." "We know, Mom," Darnell interrupted. "But we also have to think about you. The medical bills are going to be huge. They could wipe out your entire savings." Once again, money. Always money. My husband was dying and they were counting the costs. That night, alone in the hospital room, I took Willie's hand and spoke to him as if he could hear me. "My love, I don't know what to do. The doctors say there's no hope, but I can't let you go. I can't imagine my life without you." It was then that something happened that still gives me chills. His fingers moved slightly, squeezing mine with an almost imperceptible force. His lips moved as if he were trying to say something, but no sound came out. I called the nurses, desperate. "He's reacting. He's trying to talk." But when they arrived, Willie had already returned to his previous state. The nurse checked the monitors and shook her head. "Sometimes there are involuntary movements. Muscle spasms, ma'am. It doesn't mean he's conscious." But I knew what I had felt. Willie had been trying to communicate with me. He was struggling to tell me something important. 2 days later, in the early hours of Friday morning, the machine's alarms went off. The lights flickered. The nurses rushed to Willie's room. I was dozing in the hallway when the noise woke me up. "No, no, no!" I screamed, running towards the bedroom. The doctors worked for 40 minutes trying to resuscitate him, but it was useless. At 4:37 in the morning, Willie Johnson was officially pronounced dead. The pain I felt at that moment was physical. It was as if my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I collapsed beside his bed, hugging his still warm body, refusing to accept that he was gone forever. Marcus and Darnell arrived at the hospital an hour after their father's death. They looked prepared, as if they were waiting for the call. They brought papers, documents, phone numbers of funeral homes. "We've already spoken to Peaceful Rest Funeral Home," Marcus told me as I still cried inconsolably. "They can pick up the body this morning." "We've also contacted insurance," Darnell added. "The claims process is already underway." How could they be so efficient, so organized, so cold just an hour after losing their father? Something was wrong, deeply wrong. But my pain was so intense that I couldn't think clearly. Have you ever lost someone you loved and noticed that other people seemed more interested in the money than the loss. Have you ever felt something was wrong, but the pain was too great to investigate? The funeral was scheduled for the following Monday. Marcus made all the arrangements without really consulting me. He chose the simplest casket, the shortest service, as if he wanted to get it all over with as quickly as possible. "It's what Dad would have wanted," I said, when I complained about not being included in decisions. "Something simple, no complications." But Willie deserved better than this indecent rush to bury and forget him. The day of the funeral arrived, cloudy and cold, as if the sky itself were crying for Willie. I wore my only black dress, the same one I wore to my mother's funeral years ago. My hands were shaking so badly that Betty had to help me button the small buttons in the back. "Be strong, Dorothy Mae," my dear friend whispered as she carefully combed my hair. "Willie would like to see you strong." But I didn't feel strong. I felt empty, like a soulless shell. 42 years of marriage can't be buried so easily. Every object in the house reminded me of him. His coffee mug on the table, his tools in the workshop, his pillow, which still held his scent. When we arrived at the cemetery, I was surprised at how few people showed up. I expected to see more of Willie's co-workers from the shop, more neighbors, more acquaintances. But it was just Marcus, Darnell, Keisha, Betty, me, and the pastor. For a man who had lived in the same city for 70 years, who had helped so many people, the funeral felt strangely empty. "Where are your father's friends from the workshop?" I asked Marcus. "We didn't want to disturb anyone," he replied quickly. "Dad was a private person. He would have preferred something intimate." But that wasn't true. Willie loved his community. He cared about his neighbors. He wished they would come say goodbye. Why did Marcus decide to do everything so secretively, so hastily? During the service, I watched my children with a strange emotional detachment. Marcus wore a solemn expression appropriate for the occasion, but his eyes constantly darted to the clock. Darnell looked restless, as if he had more important things to do. Keisha discreetly checked her phone behind her black veil. It was as if they were saying goodbye to their father with impatience and distraction. The pastor spoke about eternal life, about well-deserved rest, about reunion with God. His words felt hollow in my broken heart. I didn't want Willie to rest in peace. I wanted him to come home with me, to continue growing old together, to continue sipping iced tea on the porch every night. When it came time to pour dirt into the casket, my legs refused to support me. Betty had to support me as I sobbed uncontrollably. The sound of earth hitting wood was final, conclusive, hopeless. It was at that exact moment, standing beside my husband's grave, that my phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. "I'm alive. It's not me in the coffin." My heart stopped. The letters danced before my eyes as if I were hallucinating. "Were you losing your mind from so much pain?" With trembling hands, I replied, "Who are you?" The answer came immediately. "I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our children." The phone fell from my hands as if it were on fire. Betty bent down to pick it up, but I stopped her abruptly. I couldn't let anyone else see those messages. Not until I understood what was happening. "Are you okay, Mom?" Charles asked, approaching with a worried expression. I stared at him, trying to find some clue in his face. His eyes seemed sincere, but now every gesture, every word, every expression seemed suspicious. "I'm fine," I lied, putting my phone in my bag. "I just need to go home." Have you ever received a message that changed everything you believed in? Have you ever had to pretend to be normal while your world crumbled inside? On the way home, I couldn't get those messages out of my head. Could someone be playing a cruel joke at the worst moment of my life? Or was there really a possibility that Willie was alive? But if he were alive, who would we have buried? And if he weren't alive, who knew enough details about our lives to write something so specific about our children? That night, alone in the house that now felt like a tomb, I reviewed every detail of the last few days. Willie's accident had been strange from the start. According to Marcus, a machine had exploded in the workshop, but Willie knew every screw and wire in that place. He was meticulous about maintenance, obsessive about safety. Besides, how did my kids get to the hospital so quickly if no one had notified them? The hospital had called me first. I was the emergency contact. How did they know about the accident before me? And then, there was the money. From day one, Marcus and Darnell talked about insurance policies and beneficiaries as if they'd been waiting for this moment, preparing for it. I decided to check Willie's papers. At his old wooden desk, he kept all his important documents in a metal box. Insurance policies, the house deed, workshop documents. Everything was there. I found the $50,000 life insurance policy Marcus had mentioned, but there was something I couldn't remember. The policy had been updated just 6 months earlier, increasing coverage from $5,000 to $50,000. Why did Willie increase his life insurance? He never mentioned this change to me, and more importantly, who suggested he do this? I kept searching and discovered something even more disturbing. A workers' compensation insurance policy I hadn't heard of, purchased just 2 months before his death. $75,000 in case of accidental death on the job. $125,000 in total. A fortune for a family like ours, but also a fortune tempting enough for someone without scruples. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the same unknown number. Check the bank account. See who is moving money. This time, I didn't hesitate. The person, whoever it was, knew too much to be joking. They knew about the insurance. They knew about my children. They knew details that only someone very close to us could know. The next day, I went to the bank where Willie and I had kept our account 30 years ago. Mrs. Thompson, the manager who had known us for a long time, greeted me with sincere condolences. Dorothy Mae, I'm sorry about Willie. He was a good man. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I came to check our accounts. I need to understand our financial situation. She showed me her bank statements for the last 6 months. What I saw left me paralyzed. Over the past 3 months, we've had large withdrawals from our savings account. $2,000 in January, $5,000 in February, $7,000 in March. Money I didn't know had been withdrawn. Who authorized these withdrawals? I asked in a shaky voice. Your husband came in person, Mrs. Thompson explained. He said he needed the money for repairs to the shop, but I kept track of the household accounts. I knew exactly how much money we had and what we spent. Willie never mentioned expensive repairs at the shop, and we definitely never talked about withdrawing thousands of dollars from our savings. Do you have the signatures for these withdrawals? I asked. She showed me the receipts. It did indeed look like Willie's signature, but there was something wrong with the handwriting. It was too shaky, too uncertain for her usually firm and clear script. Mrs. Thompson, I asked, my heart pounding. Did he come alone to make these withdrawals? Or was there someone with him? She thought for a moment. Now that you mention it, I think he came with one of his sons once or twice. Marcus, I think. He said he was helping his father with the paperwork because Willie had trouble reading documents without his glasses. Marcus. My son was involved in money looting that I didn't know about. He used his father's tired eyes as an excuse. But Willie could see perfectly well with his glasses. I never took them off during the day. That afternoon, as I was looking over my bank receipts over and over, I received another message. The insurance was their idea. They convinced Willie he needed more protection for you. It was a trap. I could no longer deny the evidence piling up in front of me. The mysteriously increased insurance premiums, the unauthorized funds, Marcus's involvement in transactions I knew nothing about, his suspicious efficiency in organizing the funeral, his coldness during his father's agony. But the question that terrified me was, if they really planned Willie's death, how did they do it? And who was sending me these messages? How did this person know so much about what had happened? Have you ever discovered that people close to you have been lying to you for months? Have you ever realized that every strange detail was part of a bigger plan? The following days became a nightmare of doubt and suspicion. Every smile from Marcus, every hug from Darnell, every word of condolence felt like a mask hiding something sinister. But I needed more proof before I could accept a truth as horrible as the one that was forming in my mind. My phone kept receiving messages from the mysterious number. Go to Willie's workshop, look on his desk. There are things you haven't seen. I decided to go to the garage for the first time since the accident. Marcus said a machine had exploded. But when I got there, I found something completely different than what I expected. The workshop was strangely clean, too clean to have been the scene of an explosion. There were no burn marks on the walls, no debris, no signs of the destruction such a serious accident must have caused. Where is the machine that exploded? I asked aloud. I looked around the workshop and found every machine in its place, working perfectly. The air compressor, the welding machine, the electric saw, all were intact. What then had been the cause of the accident? On Willie's desk, I found something that gave me the creeps. A note written in his handwriting, dated 3 days before his death. Marcus insists I need more insurance. He says it's for Dorothy Mae, but something doesn't feel right. I don't trust his intentions. Below that note was another. Darnell brought me papers to sign. He said they're for modernizing the shop, but I don't understand what it's all about. Why the rush? My husband had suspicions. He had sensed our children's evil intentions, but he died before he could tell me. I kept looking and found a sealed envelope with my name on it. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter from Willie. My dear Dorothy Mae, if you're reading this, it means something's happened to me. Over the past few months, I've noticed strange changes in Marcus and Darnell. They're very interested in our money, the insurance, and selling the house. Keisha is putting a lot of pressure on them. Yesterday, Marcus told me I should be more concerned about my safety because at my age, any accident could be fatal. I don't know why, but those words sounded like a threat. I love you, Dorothy Mae. If anything happens to me, don't trust anyone blindly, not even our children. All my love, Willie. The letter fell from my hands. Willie had felt his own death. He had seen the signs that I, blinded by maternal love, had ignored. That night, Marcus came to visit me. He arrived with a bottle of wine and a smile that now seemed completely fake. Mom, I was thinking about your future, he said, pouring himself a glass without asking if I wanted one. The insurance money is already being processed. It will be $125,000. How do you know the exact value? I asked, feigning innocence. Well, I helped Dad with the insurance paperwork. He wanted to make sure you had enough money to live comfortably. A lie. Willie never wanted to increase the insurance. According to his own statement, Marcus had pressured him. And what do you think I should do with this money? I asked, watching his reaction closely. His eyes shone with a gleam that gave me chills. You could buy a smaller, more comfortable home. Or better yet, move to a nice retirement community where you'd have company and health care. Darnell and I could manage your money so it goes further. Manage my money. We just want to take care of you, Mom. At your age, it's easy to get scammed or make bad financial decisions. We know about investing, about business. We could triple that amount in a few years. Triple my money, or make it disappear into their own pockets. Let me think about it, he said, stalling for time. Sure, Keisha said, with her false sweetness. But not for long. For your own good. After they left, I sat in my kitchen, shaking with anger and fear. My own children, my flesh and blood, had not only murdered their father, but now they planned to steal everything I had left. That night, my phone vibrated with a message longer than the others. Dorothy Mae, this is Isaiah Crawford, a private investigator. Willie hired me 3 weeks before he died because he suspected Marcus and Darnell. They poisoned him with antifreeze mixed into his breakfast. I have audio recordings of them planning the whole thing. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, go to the cafe on the corner. Sit at the table in the back. I'll be there. Finally, I would know who was sending me these messages. And most importantly, I would have the proof I needed to get justice for my husband's death. But I also knew I didn't have much time. Marcus and Darnell had already shown their hand. If I didn't act quickly, I'd end up locked in a nursing home while they spent the money that cost Willie his life. The war had begun, and even though I was a 68-year-old woman against 2 ruthless men, I had something they didn't. The truth. And the truth, sooner or later, always finds a way to come out. Have you ever discovered a truth so terrible you wished you were wrong? Have you ever had to summon the courage to face the people you loved most in the world? The next day arrived, filled with nervousness and anticipation. I dressed carefully, choosing my most formal purple dress, the one I wore on important occasions. If I were to find the man who could give me the answers I needed, I wanted to be prepared for any revelation. At 2:30 in the afternoon, I walked toward the corner cafe with determined but cautious steps. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every person on the street could be a spy sent by my children. The paranoia they accused me of was beginning to seem justified. The cafe was moderately crowded. I went straight to the back table as instructed. I ordered a chamomile tea and waited, my hands trembling slightly on the worn wooden table. At exactly 3 o'clock, a man of about 50 approached my table. He was tall, gray-haired, with intelligent eyes and a serious but kind expression. He carried a brown briefcase under his arm. "Mrs. Johnson?" he asked quietly. I nodded, still not trusting my voice. "I'm Isaiah Crawford. I'm sorry for your loss. Willie was a good man." He sat down across from me and placed the folder on the table. "Before I show you what I've got, I need you to know that what you're about to hear and see will be very painful. Are you ready?" "I've been preparing myself since I received your first message," I replied with a firmness I didn't know I had. Isaiah opened the briefcase and took out a small voice recorder. "Willie came to see me a month ago. He was concerned about his children's behavior. He hired me to discreetly investigate them." Pressed the play button. Willie's voice, so familiar and dear, filled the small space between us. "Isaiah, I need you to know that if something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Marcus and Darnell have been pressuring me to increase my life insurance. Yesterday, Marcus brought me paperwork. He said it was to better protect Dorothy Mae, but when I read it, I realized there were also clauses that directly benefited them. My heart raced. Hearing Willie's voice was like having him back for a few minutes. But his words confirmed my worst suspicions. The recording continued. "Darnell has been asking strange questions about my daily routine, what I eat for breakfast, what time I leave the house, if Dorothy Mae goes to the garage with me. He says it's out of concern, but there's something about the way he asks that worries me." Isaiah paused the recording. That conversation was 3 weeks before his death. But I have something more recent. Another recording played, this time with Marcus's voice in the background, talking on the phone. "No, we can't wait any longer. The old man is starting to get suspicious. Yesterday he asked me why I was so interested in his insurance. Yes, I already have the antifreeze. It works perfectly because the symptoms sound like a heart attack or stroke. No, Mom won't be a problem. After Dad dies, she'll be so devastated that we can do whatever we want with her." Tears started rolling down my face. It was my son's voice. My own son, coldly planning his father's murder. "There's more," Isaiah said softly. "This recording is from the day before Willie died." A new recording started. This time it was Darnell talking to someone. "Everything's ready. Tomorrow Marcus will put antifreeze in his father's coffee. We told him it was a special vitamin supplement a doctor recommended. The idiot will drink it without suspecting a thing. The symptoms start with dizziness and confusion, then loss of vision, seizures, coma. The doctors will think it's a stroke or heart attack. By the time they realize it's poisoning, it will be too late." My world completely collapsed. They didn't just plan Willie's murder. They executed it with a coldness that terrified me. How was it possible that my children, the babies I breastfed, the boys I comforted in their nightmares, were capable of something so monstrous? "How did you get those recordings?" I asked through sobs. "Willie asked me to put listening devices in his house," Isaiah explained. "He was scared, but he didn't know exactly what. We put them on his landline and other strategic locations." He took a series of photographs from the folder. "I have this too. Marcus buying antifreeze at a hardware store 30 miles out of town. He paid cash and used a fake name, but I have it on video. The photos clearly showed Marcus leaving a hardware store with a small bottle in his hands. The date on the photos was 5 days before Willie's death. And this," Isaiah continued, showing more documents. "These are Marcus and Darnell's financial records for the past 6 months. They spent far more money than their income warranted. Marcus owes $90,000 to a creditor in town. Darnell has $60,000 gambling debts. They were desperate. It all started to make sense. It wasn't just greed that motivated Willie's murder. It was financial desperation. My children were broke and saw their father as a source of quick and easy money. Why didn't you go to the police immediately after Willie's death?" I asked. "Because Marcus and Darnell are very clever. They bribed the doctor who treated Willie at the hospital to change the official diagnosis. Instead of poisoning, the death certificate says heart failure due to complications from a workplace accident. Without this medical evidence, my recordings might not be enough for a conviction." "Oh, but now we have all the evidence together," he said, feeling a mixture of pain and determination. "Exactly. And there's one more thing you need to know." My blood ran cold. "What?" "Her sons were planning to kill her too." Isaiah played one last recording, this time with Marcus and Darnell's voices combined. After we get the money from Dad's insurance, we need to get rid of Mom too. We can't risk her getting suspicious or someone putting ideas in her head. How? Darnell asked. Just like with Dad. But this time, we can make it look like a suicide due to depression. A widow who can't live without her husband. No one would question it. And as the sole heirs, we'd get everything. The house, the savings, the insurance money, almost $200,000 in total. The recording has stopped. I was shaking uncontrollably. My children hadn't just murdered their father. They were planning to murder me too. All for money. Can you imagine the pain of finding out that your own children planned to kill not only your husband, but you as well? Have you ever felt like the people you loved were capable of anything? Mrs. Johnson, Isaiah said gently, I know this is devastating, but we have enough evidence to make them pay for what they did. What do we do now? First, we need to go to the police with all this evidence, I replied, wiping away my tears. Second, we need to act fast. My children are planning to declare me mentally incompetent tomorrow. If they succeed, it will be much more difficult to proceed legally. Tomorrow? Isaiah frowned. Yes. I intercepted a phone conversation this morning. They're meeting with Judge Miller at 10 o'clock this morning to begin the mental incapacitation process. I got up from the table with a determination I hadn't felt in weeks. Then we have to act tonight. Exactly, Isaiah confirmed. But first, there's one more thing I want to show you. He took one last photograph from the folder. In it, Willie was leaving a medical clinic I didn't recognize. 3 days before he died, her husband went for a complete medical examination at a clinic in Birmingham. The results showed that he was perfectly healthy. There were no signs of heart disease. His blood pressure was normal. Everything was perfect. This definitively proves that his death was caused by poisoning, not natural health problems. That was the final piece of evidence we needed. Willie had been a healthy man, murdered by his own children. Isaiah, she said, taking his hand, thank you for keeping your promise to my husband. Now, let's seek justice. That same night, Isaiah and I went straight to the police station. Sergeant Williams was working the night shift, which was perfect for our purposes. When we arrived, it was 8 o'clock at night, and the police station was relatively quiet. Sergeant Williams, he said firmly, I need to file a formal complaint for the murder of my husband, Willie Johnson. The sergeant looked at me in surprise. Murder? Mrs. Johnson? The death certificate says he died of heart complications after a workplace accident. The death certificate is fake, I replied, placing Isaiah's folder on his desk. My husband was deliberately poisoned with antifreeze by our own children. For the next 2 hours, Isaiah and I presented all the evidence. The audio recordings, the photographs of Marcus buying antifreeze, the bank documents showing the unauthorized withdrawals, Willie's medical results proving his perfect health, and finally, the recorded conversations where my children confessed to both their father's murder and their plans to kill me. Sergeant Williams listened to each recording with an increasingly serious expression. When we were done, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head in disbelief. This is monstrous, he muttered. Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Johnson? Once we arrest your children, there's no turning back. Sergeant, I replied with all the dignity I could muster. Those men murdered my husband in cold blood for money. They were planning to murder me too. They are no longer my children. They are criminals who must pay for their crimes. We'll need the coroner to exhume Willie's body to confirm the presence of antifreeze, the sergeant explained. Are you prepared for that? Do whatever it takes, I replied without hesitation. Sergeant Williams immediately called the district attorney. Despite the late hour, the gravity of the case prompted the prosecutor to come to the station in person. After reviewing all the evidence, he immediately authorized arrest warrants for Marcus and Darnell. We'll proceed at dawn, the prosecutor explained. We need to make sure we have all the evidence before they can destroy any additional evidence. Isaiah took me home that night. Are you sure you'll be okay alone? He asked with concern. I'll be fine, I replied. After everything I've learned, I'm not afraid anymore. I have justice on my side. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat awake in the kitchen, looking at the pictures of Willie we had on the walls. For the first time since her death, I didn't just feel pain. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction, knowing that justice for her murder was coming. At 6 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Mom, you need to come to Darnell's right now. Something terrible has happened." "What happened?" I asked, feigning concern. "I'd better explain it to you in person. Please come quickly." I knew it was a trap. After listening to the recordings the night before, I knew they were planning to advance their plans to get rid of me. But he also knew that the police were already on their way to arrest them. "I'm going," I lied. Instead of going to Darnell's house, I stayed in my kitchen and waited. At 7:30 in the morning, I saw through the window several police cars heading towards my children's houses in different directions. My phone rang repeatedly for the next hour. First Marcus, then Darnell, both with increasingly desperate voices asking where I was. But I didn't answer any calls. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Sergeant Williams knocked on my door. "Mrs. Johnson, we have arrested Marcus and Darnell. They are in police custody, charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder." I felt my legs tremble, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. "How did they react?" I asked. Marcus denied everything at first, but when we played him the recordings, he broke down. Darnell tried to escape through the back window of the house. We had to chase him for 6 blocks. Have you ever had to make the hardest decision of your life? Have you ever had to choose between justice and protecting the people you loved? That afternoon, Keisha came to see me. She arrived sobbing, begging, completely different from the cold, calculating woman I knew. "Mrs. Johnson, please, you have to drop the charges against Marcus. He's not bad. He was just desperate because of his debts. This is my fault too. I pushed him too hard for money." I looked at her without a trace of compassion. "Keisha, your husband poisoned my husband. He was planning to murder me too. There is no explanation or justification for this." "But we're family," she cried in despair. "Think of what this will do to family." "The family died the day you decided to kill Willie for money," I replied coldly. "Now please, get out of my house." 3 days later, the exhumation of Willie's body was carried out. The lab results confirmed exactly what Isaiah had discovered: lethal levels of antifreeze in his system, enough to cause all the symptoms he experienced before his death. The case became a citywide sensation. No one could believe that 2 sons had murdered their own father for money. Local newspapers called it the most cruel crime of the decade. In the following weeks, more details came to light during the investigation. Marcus actually owed $90,000 to illegal loan sharks who had begun threatening him with violence. Darnell had lost $60,000 in underground casinos and was also facing threats. They had seen Willie's life insurance money as their only salvation, but their greed led them to increase the premium so drastically that it aroused their own father's suspicions. We also discovered that the doctor who forged the death certificate had received $10,000 in cash from Marcus. He was also arrested for obstruction of justice and forgery of official documents. Isaiah explained to me every detail of the plan Willie had made with him. "Your husband was smarter than his children gave him credit for. He knew something bad was coming, but he didn't know exactly what. He hired me not only to investigate Marcus and Darnell, but also to protect you in case something happened to him." "Did he know they were going to kill him?" I asked. "Not exactly," Isaiah said, "but he suspected his life was in danger. That's why we installed the recording devices. That's why we documented everything. He wanted to make sure that if something happened to him, the truth would come out. My Willie, even in his final days, had protected me. He had anticipated our children's betrayal and taken steps to ensure justice prevailed. The trial was scheduled to begin in 2 months. Both Marcus and Darnell faced first-degree murder charges, which in our state carried a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. The day of judgment arrived after 2 months of intense legal preparation. The courtroom was packed. Reporters from several regional newspapers had come to cover what was already known as the case of the murderous children. The whole town was there. Neighbors, Willie's former co-workers, even people I barely knew but who wanted to witness this historic moment of justice. I wore my best black dress, the same one I wore to our wedding so many years ago. But now, it represented mourning and dignity. Isaiah accompanied me, sitting beside me throughout the process. His presence gave me the strength to face what would be the most difficult day of my life. Marcus and Darnell entered the courtroom handcuffed, dressed in orange prison uniforms. Seeing my children like this broke my heart all over again. But I no longer felt sorry for them. Only a deep sadness for the moral death they chose long before physically murdering their father. The prosecutor presented the case with devastating precision. One by one, the recordings were played for the court. Silence fell every time Marcus and Darnell's voices were heard, coldly planning Willie's murder. When the prosecutor played the recording of them planning to kill me too, several people in the audience gasped in horror. One elderly woman stood up and left the courtroom in tears. I couldn't blame her. It was hard to process such cruelty. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said during his opening argument, "this is no ordinary case of familial greed. This is a case of cold, calculated premeditation, where two men decided to murder the father who raised them with love and sacrifice simply because they needed money to pay off gambling debts and irresponsible loans." Marcus and Darnell's lawyers attempted to present a defense based on desperate circumstances and outside influences. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings didn't lie. The bank documents didn't lie. The forensic evidence of the antifreeze in Willie's body didn't lie. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand with shaky legs but a clear mind. I had been waiting for this moment for months. "Mrs. Johnson," the prosecutor asked me, "can you tell us what your relationship with your children was like before your husband's murder?" "I thought I had a good relationship with them," I replied, looking directly at Marcus and Darnell. "I raised them with love. I sacrificed everything for their well-being. Their father worked from sunrise to sunset to give them the best we could. I never imagined that this love and sacrifice would become the reason for his murder. At any point, did you suspect that they might harm your husband? No. That's the most painful part of all. I trusted them completely. When they told me Willie had had an accident at the garage, I believed them. When they arranged the funeral so quickly, I thought they were being efficient in their grieving process. I never imagined they were covering up a murder." Marcus bowed his head during my testimony. Darnell looked at me defiantly, but I saw tears in his eyes. Too late for tears. Too late for regret. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the prosecutor decided to play the full recording of the conversation where they planned my own murder. Marcus's voice filled the courtroom. "After we get the father's insurance money, we need to get rid of the mother too. We can't risk her getting suspicious." A murmur of horror swept through the audience. Several people turned to look at me with expressions of disbelief and compassion. "How did you feel when you first heard this recording?" the prosecutor asked me. "I realized I'd lost my two sons long before I lost my husband," I replied, my voice cracking but firm. "The babies I'd nursed, the children I'd comforted in their nightmares, had died and been replaced by two strangers capable of any cruelty for money." The defense tried to cross-examine me, suggesting that perhaps I had misinterpreted my children's intentions, that perhaps grief had caused me to exaggerate the evidence. But the recordings spoke for themselves. Isaiah also testified, explaining in detail how Willie had hired him because he was afraid of his own children. He described every step of the investigation, every piece of evidence collected, every recorded moment that revealed the truth. The coroner presented the exhumation results, confirming the lethal presence of antifreeze in Willie's body. He explained how this poison acts slowly, causing exactly the symptoms my husband had experienced before his death. After 3 days of devastating testimony, the closing arguments arrived. The prosecutor was overwhelming. Marcus and Darnell Johnson are not victims of circumstance. They are predators who saw their own parents as financial obstacles that needed to be eliminated. They planned, executed, and covered up the murder of Willie Johnson. And they were planning to do the same to Dorothy Mae. They do not deserve compassion. They deserve justice. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. I could hear my own heartbeat as the judge read the verdict. In the case of the state against Marcus Johnson and Darnell Johnson, on the charge of first-degree murder of Willie Johnson, we find the defendants guilty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Marcus slumped in his chair, finally grasping the magnitude of what he had done. Darnell remained rigid, staring blankly ahead. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Dorothy Mae Johnson, we find the defendants guilty. The judge immediately proceeded to sentence. Marcus Johnson and Darnell Johnson, for the premeditated murder of your father and conspiracy to murder your mother, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 30 years. When I heard those words, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Justice. Finally, there was justice for Willie. Have you ever had to testify against the people you loved? Have you ever felt both relief and pain when justice was served? After the trial, many people came to hug me and express their support. Betty cried with me, not out of sadness, but out of relief. Dorothy Mae, Willie can rest in peace now, she whispered to me. That night I returned to my home. It felt different now. It was no longer a place of pain and betrayal. It was my home again. The place where Willie and I had been happy for 42 years. Isaiah came to visit me a week after the trial. How do you feel? He asked. At peace, I replied honestly. For the first time since Willie's death, I sleep soundly. I know he's resting because his death didn't go unpunished. What about the money? The insurance, the savings? I donated the life insurance money to a foundation for victims of family crimes, I explained. That money was stained with blood. I could never have used it. My personal savings are enough to live modestly for the rest of my days. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in the prison mail. It was from Marcus. Mother, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret everything. The money, the debt, the desperation. They blinded us. We lost all humanity. Darnell and I destroyed the most loving family in the world for $125,000 that we never even got to enjoy. Tomorrow, I'm going to commit suicide in my cell. I can't live with what we've done. Take care, Mom. Tell Dad we're sorry we were such bad sons. I didn't arrive in time to stop his suicide. Marcus was found hanged in his cell the next day. Darnell, upon learning of his brother's death, suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was transferred to the prison psychiatric hospital. Today, 5 years after the trial, I live peacefully in my small house in Maplewood. I turned Willie's workshop into a garden where I grow flowers to take to his grave every Sunday. Isaiah has become a close friend. He visits me regularly to make sure I'm okay. Sometimes neighbors ask me if I miss my children. The answer is complicated. I miss the children they were, but those children died long before Willie did. The men they became were not my sons. They were strangers who shared my blood, but not my heart. I learned that true family is not defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and mutual respect. Willie was my true family for 42 years. The friends who supported me during the trial are my family now. Justice didn't bring Willie back, but it gave me peace. And on quiet nights, when I sit on the porch where we so often drank iced tea together, I swear I can feel your presence. Proud of myself for being strong enough to do the right thing, even when it meant losing my children forever. The foundation I established with the life insurance money has become something bigger than I ever imagined. The Willie Johnson Foundation for Victims of Family Crimes now helps dozens of families each year who have experienced tragedies similar to mine. We have psychologists, lawyers, and private investigators all working to ensure that no other family has to suffer in silence what I did. 6 months ago, a 40-year-old woman came to see me. Her name was Amanda. She suspected her brother had murdered their mother for the inheritance. His story was painfully similar to mine. Greedy relatives, pressure to sell property, strange behavior after death. The foundation provided a private investigator, free legal advice, and psychological support throughout the process. When her brother was convicted of murder 3 months later, Amanda came to hug me, crying, "Mrs. Johnson, you saved my life. If you hadn't had the courage to report your own children, I never would have had the courage to report mine." It's these moments that remind me why all the pain I went through was worth it. Marcus Darnell is still alive, though he's no longer the same man I knew. After Marcus's suicide, his mind was completely shattered. Doctors say he lives in a constant state of guilt and paranoia, believing Willie comes to visit him every night to berate him for the murder. He tried to kill himself 3 times, but prison guards keep him under constant surveillance. I receive letters from him occasionally. They're incoherent, full of desperate apologies and pleas for forgiveness. At first I read them, searching for some trace of the son I raised with so much love. But then I realized that reading those letters only reopened wounds that had already healed. Now I keep them unopened in a shoebox. Maybe one day I'll read them, maybe not. I have the right to protect my peace of mind. And the town of Maplewood will never forget the incident. It became a local legend. A story parents tell their children as a warning against greed and betrayal. Some see me as a heroine, others as a cruel woman who sent her own children to prison. I don't care what anyone thinks. I know the truth. And the truth gave me the peace I needed. My health remains surprisingly good for my age. The doctor says it's because I've finally managed to let go of the stress and sadness I was carrying. The body heals when the heart finds peace, he explained during my last checkup. Chowkerfris. Sunday mornings are my favorite. I cut fresh flowers from my garden and walk to the cemetery to visit Willie's grave. His tombstone now bears an inscription I had engraved after the trial. Willie Johnson, beloved husband, betrayed father, honorable man. Your love was stronger than your death. I tell him everything that happened during the week. I talk about the foundation, about the families we've helped, about the thank you letters I received from people who found justice thanks to our story. I swear I can feel your approval in the wind that moves the leaves of the nearby trees. You know what's strangest, my love? He said during my last visit. I no longer feel pain when I think of Marcus and Darnell. I only feel pity. Pity because they had all the love in the world and they chose hate. They had a family that adored them and they chose betrayal. They had the opportunity to be honorable men like you, and they chose to be murderers. Last week, a local reporter came to interview me for a documentary about family crimes. She asked me if there was anything I would like to say to others who might be going through similar situations. Family is no excuse for crime, I replied. Love isn't blind. Love with boundaries is true love. If someone who claims to love you is capable of hurting you for money or convenience, that person doesn't truly love you, and it's never, ever too late to seek justice, no matter who's at fault. This year, on the 5th anniversary of Willie's death, I organized a special ceremony in his memory. Over 200 people came, neighbors, foundation members, families we help, local officials. It was beautiful to see how his death, which began as a tragedy, had become a force for good in so many lives. Isaiah gave an emotional speech. Willie Johnson died because of his children's greed, but his legacy lives on in every family that finds justice thanks to his wife's courage. Evil tried to destroy his story, but good transformed it into hope for others. Making home. At night before I go to sleep, I sometimes take out old photos of when Marcus and Darnell were kids. I see them playing in the yard, hugging their father, laughing with me on Christmases past. I allow myself to mourn those innocent children who once existed, before greed corrupted them completely. But I no longer weep for the men they became. Those men chose their fate. Chakrafai. My story ended up being bigger than my personal tragedy. It became a symbol that justice is possible, even when it comes from the most unexpected sources. A 68-year-old widow proved that truth is more powerful than lies, that true love is stronger than betrayal, and that it's never too late to do the right thing. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Isaiah will be coming over for coffee as usual. I'll make his favorite dessert and tell him about the thank you letters that arrived this week. Then we will work together in the garden, planting new flowers for spring. Life goes on. Simpler, but more authentic than before. I learned that true family isn't about shared blood, but about shared values, mutual respect, and a love that never turns into harm. Willie, wherever you are, I hope you know I kept the promise I made to your grave that terrible day. I found the truth. I sought justice, and I transformed our pain into hope for others. Your death was not in vain, my love. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel so I can continue bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I look forward to hearing your comments on the story. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next story. With love and respect, Grandma's Diaries.